Hello friends, be with you in a second. As soon as I get more important things taken care of. Not really, just kidding. Hello, thank you for joining me today. My name is Dan, and this is Daily Art Adventure number 700. Woohoo! Can I hear a woohoo? I know I should be doing something really special when I hit 100 something. But I have thought of anything. So anyway, Daily Art Adventure number 700. Let's go. So it's official. Only 300 more till I get 1,000. That's about a year and a half from now. I am, as you can see, working on this portrait that I started yesterday of two precious little boys who are now in their late 20s or 30s. One of them is getting married a week from Saturday. Not at this age, of course. All right, let me jump right in then. A couple things. Oh, I guess I'm going to zoom back out. Sorry. So, feeling this, just going by feel, the painting is not quite dry. It's dry to the touch, so to speak, but tacky, if you know the sensation. That means I used slow drying paint. I didn't use very much liquid or it would be all dry. So today, everything I do from this point onward then has to be slower drying, right? I wouldn't want to use liquid fast dry on top of this or it'll crack. So I've gone to my favorite, somebody corrected me recently. This is not a slow dry medium. It's just, well, hello, Alicio Peluso. From Italy. Welcome, good to have you on board. This is the slowest medium that I typically use, that's all. So it's a medium slow. And also, whereas normally I use Alkyd titanium white. I'm looking for my tube of Alkyd, not finding it. This is, look at that beautiful old, a sight that only an artist would appreciate. An old tube of paint. This is regular titanium, not Alkyd fast dry. Do you follow me? So you want slow dry on top of fast. That's what fat over lean means. People should not use that expression anymore because it's very confusing, because too many people think that if you add a medium to your paint, you're making it fat. That is not at all the case. All right. It used to be true back in the days of when everybody used linseed oil. All right. I'm pretty happy, by the way, with the likeness. I did this yesterday. I did this last night and did this much more quickly than the first one. Let me show you then for comparison. Zoom in as far as I can. So there's the first boy. I definitely have a likeness. You can tell who it is. Needs just a tiny bit of work. Likewise, here's the second boy. He's larger because he's in front of the first boy. And again, a pretty good likeness. I see today, this is a mistake I often make. So it's good to file away as you get better at your portraits. what are your default mistakes? One of mine is I tend to make my eyes too big. So I need to make those eyes smaller. His bottom lip is a little bit crooked. And then there's just a little bit. I'm quite happy with the painterly feel, especially of this face. But I have, as you can see, a fair amount of work to do. I hope to finish today. The first thing I'm going to do is do a glaze, just the way I do on my landscapes. I'm going to do a very pale glaze over both of their faces. So both of their faces just got warmed up and darkened, which means I need to add a little bit more light, but the color is actually better. Right now it's better than it was 30 seconds ago. I'm going to use the same color. By the way, here's a good trick. I should do a separate video someday about his right ear of the boy left goes too far on top. Okay, Bruno, make sure I get that right. His right, okay, let me see that. The left boy, his right ear goes too far on top, up here. You're probably correct. Yep, good call. His ear's too big, isn't it? Thank you. Okay. Yeah, I'm going to make a note of that right now. Hang on. Because I'm a crazy artist, painter, who uses pencils in his oil paintings, which is not at all traditional. You understand that. I'm actually going to use a pencil just to remind me. I think it actually comes down a little bit too far too. I'm using a pencil just so I don't forget to do that later. Thank you, Bruno. All right, where was I? Oh, yeah, someday I should do a separate video dedicated to how to paint white things. And I'm actually showing that to you. There are many ways to paint everything, of course. You understand that. There's more than one way. But this is one good way to paint. So I did a oxide red, just a second, oxide red glaze. Now I'm coming back with I don't want to get this on his face. This is now a ultramarine glaze. So brown plus blue equals really just sort of a neutral gray. Okay, this is a good trick for painting white things. Snow, wedding dresses, clouds, white shirts, anything that's white, sheep, sheepdog, no, whatever you want to paint that's white. Do an underpainting. You could do that in acrylic, of course, or as I did, do this in oil, and then do a glaze on top. So now I have dirty white here and here, which lets me come back with highlights of white, and then I'll probably be finished. But that's coming up in a while. That's not what's on tap for today. Now let's get started up here first of all. And I'm going to tape my reference somewhere. You know what? I'm gonna put this over here on the cutting board. Pardon me, just a minute. I have a cutting board over here. There. So I can get this down. Can I go like that? Nope, too much glare. How about that? How about, could I? Pardon me, I'm going to cut it again. I'm going to find, I should have done all this before I started broadcasting, of course, but then you guys would miss all the fun. Okay, how about this? I think, all right, if I make the tape, whoa, if I make the tape go all the way around to the back. All the things we do. the things we do for art, eh? Let's see if that, see if that holds it. All right. Well, I spoke too soon. It's not quite all right. I really do want it straight. I don't want it at an angle that will really mess me up. Oh, good grief. I'm reminding myself of that. There's a man, I haven't seen him in a while now. Whoops. Okay. There's this man on YouTube. He has a fishing show, a television program about fishing. But this man is a little bit like I am right at this moment. He is just one accident after another. He's like a walking, I don't know how you could look. I guess if you looked up fishing bloopers. Yeah, I bet that's it. This man, he's not, it's like me right now. He's not trying to be funny, but he's hilarious. About every other scene, he ends up falling out of the boat into the water and stuff like that. It is so funny. I promise. You guys need a good laugh. You need to look that up. All right. Wow. So I'm seeing this with fresh eyes, right? One of the best ways to do paintings is to see something with fresh eyes. I'm looking at, of course, this boy, not this boy. Let's see if I can get you guys a little bit closer. Hang on. I'm looking at his eyes. In this eye, I need to raise up the whites of his eyes on both sides of the iris. Over here, wow, actually I need to move his iris, both sides of his iris that way. Wow, wow, wow. So here we go. I'm going to start out with what I don't like to do, which is what I call tongue painting, right? I do not like tongue painting, but alas, sometimes it needs to be done. And you guys know what I mean by tongue. Well, you know, newcomers, my friend there in Italy, what does tongue painting mean? Here's what it means. Here's the canvas. You pick up your brush like this, death control grip, and you okay, that's tongue painting. And generally speaking, I rail against it. It's horrible. But again, there are times when it has to be done. A man's got to do what a man's got to do, so to speak, or an artist, I should say. All right, so. Oh, and I'm also going to put on, talk about tongue painting, I'm going to put on 2 pairs of glasses. Is that extreme? Extreme, extreme. So that I can see up close. All right. You can't even see what I did, can you? I know, it's horrible. Next, oh, I need to mix up some white. So what I mean to say, I need to mix up some whites of the eyes color. And you know, don't you, that simply by virtue of the fact that we call this the whites of the eyes, that gets a lot of artists into a lot of trouble. Now, non-artists, oh my goodness, they're a disaster. How many how many times have you seen a non-artist draw a face and the whites of the eyes are stark white, white, white? And again, I'm convinced that it's because we call it the whites of the eyes. That's why people tend to make them white. All right, so I've mixed up here a dull warm gray. I guess I would call it warm gray. Okay, let's compare now. I'm looking at the triangle on the left side of his right eye over here. How does it match up? How does my painting match up to the photograph? Not bad, but I need to add a little bit to the top. And now, please understand, again, any newcomers here, this is a positively horrible way to paint. I do not approve of what I'm doing right now. This is not good painting. Then the question that you would ask, then why are you doing it then? The answer is because sometimes things have to be done. Okay, over to the other eye. Yeah, definitely. Because an artist has got to do what man's got to do what a man's got to do, or a woman has to do what a woman has to do. Okay, so this is not what I consider at all to be good painting technique. So you beginners, now it is how, what should I say, young people early in their art journey. Okay, so I'm already back to some of my old rants, my old sermons that I preach over and over and over again. And I know it gets boring hearing me say the same thing over and over, so I'll keep it limited. But hyperrealism is fun, and everybody should do it in their youth. And they should get it out of their system, in my opinion. And boy, that's all it is. It's an opinion. The first half of our art journey, we learn to paint stuff that looks like stuff. So painting in this manner is perfectly appropriate for the first half of our art journey. Most good artists, not all, but most good artists, or should I say great artists, I'm not identifying myself as a great artist. I'm just saying most great artists do grow out of this phase, this stage of painting. Yeah, which could appropriately be called adolescent painting. Nothing wrong with adolescence, do you understand? There's only one way to get from childhood to adulthood in every aspect of life, and that is through adolescence. So I'm not knocking it, but for most of us, for most of you, this is not, what I'm doing right now is like adolescent painting, immature painting, and it's good to go through it. I certainly did, and here I am doing it again. But as you can hear, but I heartily disapprove of what I'm doing right now. I'm doing it because it needs to be done. But this is not good painting per se. I don't know if you're new to my channel, I'm probably confusing you greatly, so sorry about that. By the way, I don't know if you noticed, here, let me move my camera down just a little bit. Is that good? Nope, hang on. Move you some more. Sorry for all the shaking here. All right, so I have pre-mixed. I did this yesterday. I remixed a little bit more today. This is my flesh row, light to dark. This is my blush or blood row, light to dark. And of course, I can add all kinds of things to that. This is the color I just mixed up to do the whites of the eyes. So you can see there's titanium white and there's the whites of the eyes. Great, interesting comment a second ago. Picasso, yeah. Yeah, Jason, what a great way to put it. I think he busted a pretty good turn. I think he did too. Yeah, I think so. I'm not going to do it. Picasso did. That's all right. All right for him and all right for me. But yes, that's a fair example of what I'm talking about. Realism early on. The first half of our art journey should be, I think, about learning how to paint stuff that looks like stuff. Second half of the art journey, and I've said this before, and probably some of you really don't like it, but I don't think college students should be encouraged to go beyond the first half of the art. Of course, when you're, believe me, I remember what it was like to be an art student at age 20, 21, 22. I thought I was so mature. I thought I was so good. I didn't realize how young I was. A kudos or something, I don't know what the word is. Let me say something good about, for instance, just for instance, the Art Student League of New York. I've never been there, but I sure have seen a lot of students that came out of there over the decades. And I think they're a good example. From what I can tell, most of your time at Art Student League of New York is spent learning how to paint stuff that looks like stuff. I knew one college student, I would say, in my life, who was old for his age, if you know what I mean. Let me back up. Look at, no, something is not quite right about those eyes. Darn. I was hoping I was nailing it, but I am not. First of all, the whites of his eyes are too white, so let me fix that first. Oh, by the way, for you regular followers of me, and I look forward to reading your chats here in just a minute. You might have, if you watched me yesterday, you might have noticed what to you seemed like an inconsistency. I am always propounding this belief, this technique that in painting, you get dark with transparent colors and light with opaque colors. There is one, whoops. Hang on here a second. There's one, hang on here. Hang on just a second. Sorry about that. I've probably lost you all. Okay. Sorry about that. Hang on. I had an emergency. A text just came in, and I needed to see what it was. All right. You get light with opaque colors and dark with transparent, with one glaring exception, and that is portraiture. I suppose if you did great big huge portraits, you could follow that. But generally speaking, on portraits of this size, say, give or take, if you try to get dark with transparent colors, you're going to overdo it. Does that make sense? So that rule that I talk about all the time, that's because I'm not usually doing portraits, that rule does not hold for portraiture, because if you try to make your darks using transparent colors, you'll usually overshoot the mark. you will make it too dark. So in portraiture, I get dark and light with mostly transparent colors. But then, as you saw, I just put a glaze over the whole thing. So that sort of... Okay, I'm trying to figure out why this eye is too crisp. There's something that's too hard about this eye, and I can't figure out exactly what it is. So bear with me for a minute. Whoops, I'm sorry. Here we go. Sorry. I didn't paint much, I promise. Sorry about that. There's something too crisp. Now, I'm not trying to imitate this photograph. This is a terrible photograph in many respects. But no, just ignoring the photograph. This is too crisp. It's too cut and dried. And it may simply be just that it is, in fact, the edges are too hard. So I'm going to come in here and soften the top of his eyelashes. Again, yeah, this is terrible painting. I hope you understand what I mean by that. I think what I want to convey, especially to young painters, is do not watch me doing this and think, oh, so that's how, if you will, forgive me, that's how good painters paint. The answer is no. This is how a mediocre, this is how a mediocre portrait painter fixes his mistakes. Okay. Now, I am very curious. I would like to know, for instance, I talk about all the time, John Singer Sargent, did he ever have to do this kind of thing on his portraits? Well, first of all, did he ever paint a portrait this small? I'm not sure. That is better. Wow. Nope, not good enough. The whites of his eyes are still too white. So darken them down again. I mean, I cannot imagine somebody like John Singer Sargent. I really can't even imagine him painting in this manner. So what you're seeing here is, I'll be nice to myself, I'll say a mid-level, and some of you will be scoffing and say, buddy, you ain't even mid-level. And I go, okay, be nice. Let me flatter myself just a little bit for a minute. This is how a mid-level, oh, that's even worse. Hang on. This is how a mediocre, okay, I just slipped from mediocre down to mid-level, from mid-level to mediocre. So this is how a mediocre portrait painter paints portraits. Now I'm just going to take this fine little brush right here, and all I'm doing is messing up lines. I'm just softening stuff everywhere. Just dragging the paint by pointing, by dot, dot, dot. All right, that's better. I think that's better. You hear that confidence. That's better. I think that's better. That's me decaying. Stick around. All right, I think let's do a quick test, shall we? You look with me. Let me bring you in real close so you can see this. Sorry for the earthquake. Bear with me for a minute. I really want you to see this. I invite you to. All right, here's what I want you to see. That eye versus that eye. I think this one is better. I think this one I just worked on is better because it's softer. And I wish I could leave you guys that close, but if you're there, there's no room for me to paint, so I need to move you a little bit. So bear with me again while I give you a roller coaster ride. Whee! Just say wee. Throw your hands up in the air and say wee! Okay. Ouch. Injuries in the studio. That's what that's about. Okay, now after all that, can anybody say portraiture, schmortraiture? Can anybody portrait, schmortrait? Portraits are not easy. They just take time. At least if you're as bad as I am, they take time. Sorry, I have a cold. Compliments of my grandson, whom I love. But I did want him to keep his cold and not give it to me. Eyelashes need to be a little bit heavier up here. Almost. The light in his eye is a little bit too light. The iris is a little bit too light. So let me back that down a little bit. And then I'm going to enlarge his iris just a tiny bit, because he in the photograph he has these great big puppy dog irises. There we go. Whew. Now, let's move over to the other eye. Hopefully some of the lessons we learned on the first one will carry over to the second one. The first thing I'm going to do is darken the whites of his eyes considerably. That's not dark enough. Wow, it looks so dark on my palette. When I put it up there, it's like, oh, it's not much darker at all. Now, hang on a second. First of all, let's check the photograph. Can anybody else see that this eye is too low? In fact, hang on a second. Let me show you how to check that. Oh, that would not be a happy discovery. I thought I was nearly finished with this portrait. So here's one way to check it. You take a picture of the painting, and then you open it up, edit, and by the way, iPhones, you have to install additional, and then flip horizontal. Doggone it. So there's a mirror image. And indeed, I'm seeing a whole bunch of mistakes in there. There's no question this eye is too low. Dang. Okay. So now I get to demonstrate to you. How about his eyebrow? Is his eyebrow also low? At least I caught it, eh? That's the only thing I'm going to say about my portraiture. At least I'm going to stick with it till it's correct. Hi, Jason. Easy fix for you to say. Oh, crap. All right. Well, so this gives me the opportunity to talk about how to move in portraiture, how to move features. This is particularly helpful and painful if you feel like you really nailed an eye, a nose, a mouth, an ear, chin, cheek, eyebrow, whatever, and then you discover that you have to move the whole thing. Okay, now the good news, I've done this before on broadcast, but let's do it again. Jason, you're exactly correct. That is the impression. I'm just reading your comment now. That's exactly my impressions of John Singer Sargent. Of course, he was way better than me. Darn. But I'm still alive, so there's hope. And of course, he painted much larger than this. I keep hoping that all of my work on these small, irritatingly small portraits is going to make me better on the big ones. I'm certainly hoping that's the case. All right, so how to move a feature, especially if the feature's pretty close. Like in this case, I would say this eye is close, it's just in the wrong place. There's a definite procedure, definite process. In fact, let me show you this on a piece of paper. Find a piece of scrap, something. All right, here it is, because I want to diagram this for you. Let's say there's an eye. And as it is in this painting, you want the whole eye to move up, say, 1/16 of an inch, okay? The procedure is, if it's moving that way, you start moving at the top of the eye. In other words, you take the crease and you move it up 1/8 of an inch, or 1/16 of an inch, I'm sorry. Then you take the eyelash and you move that up 1/16 of an inch. Then you take the iris and move that up. Then you take the bottom, move that up. And does that make sense? So you do one piece at a time, starting at the top. You don't start at the bottom, because if you do that, you're obscuring, covering up what you have to move. So you start at the top. I hope that makes sense to you. So that's exactly what I'm going to do here. And the good news is, it's not, oh yeah, that eyebrow is a little bit low. Good. Whew. So the good news is, it's not quite as much of a disaster as you may at first have thought. Because, okay, I'm going to look at my watch. My watch, it runs fast on purpose, by the way. I make my watch fast. So it's 2:52, almost 2:53. So if you're looking at your watch and you're in my time zone, you're going, you're 5 minutes fast, and you're exactly correct. All right, so I'm moving his eyebrow up about 1/16 of an inch. This would be a good time to have more than one brush here. I want to time. I wish if I had a free phone, I might even set a timer, just to show you that and to show myself as well. It's like, okay, don't get too upset, because it's really not as bad as you think. All right? So I've moved the top of the eyebrow, then the bottom of the eyebrow. Now I'm going to move the crease, and I'm just doing this in a very mechanical way, not even really looking at the photograph. I'm just measuring what's already on the painting. I'll make corrections in a minute, but right now my hands are full, so to speak. Just moving everything. Okay, so there's the crease above his eye. Now I'm going to do the eyelid above his eye and move it up. Does that make sense? And believe it or not, and again, I tell you this because I want to remind myself, the more perfectly you rendered that feature before you have to move it, the better. Let me say that again. The more accurately you rendered that feature, the better, because then it's a very mechanical process of moving it up. Now hang on just a second. I hope that I have a curved X-Acto blade here in my drawer. Hang on. I do not. Ah, but I do have I have a little jackknife. One of the problems you can run into, especially when you're moving something that's light colored, because usually if something is very light, that means it's built up. It's got thick paint on it. All right, is that making sense to you? So what I'm doing right now is scratching off with a curved blade. That's very important. Scratching off the impasto, the thickness. Because you can't paint over impasto, whatever you want to call that. Okay, you can't move thick paint. You have to remove thick paint. All right, so once again, right, so there is his almost his eyelash. I'm mixing up a little bit of a medium dark color for this part of his eyelash over here. I'll grab another brush for the quote-unquote the whites of his eyes. Be careful how you use that term in your mind. Be careful. Always warn yourself. Say, don't forget, the white is not white. Okay, so just saying the word can mess you up. As an artist, we'd be better off calling it the gray, the gray of their eyes. In fact, the whites of people's eyes are often surprisingly blue. So keep an eye out for that. The whites of the eyes often have a very distinct blue tint to them. The black I'm using today is a combination of Prussian blue and oxide red. Speaking of black, you all know, all art teachers say don't use black, and all our teachers should stop saying don't use black. Instead, what we should be saying is don't misuse black, because in fact, it is okay sometimes to use black paint. Every rule can be broken. You just have to know when and why to break it. And in a word, in one simple description, when is it okay to use black? And that's a crazy looking eye right now. Whoa! Because I've got everything except the bottom lid is not moved up yet, so it looks terrible. But bear with me. It probably won't stay that way. When is it okay to paint black? Let me give you the answer to that question. Some of you didn't know there was ever a time to use black, and I believe there is. And that is when in fact you are painting a black object. Now that doesn't mean you always use black. Oh no, I don't mean that. But is it ever okay to use black, or advantageous or beneficial? In my opinion, the answer is yes. And the answer is that time it's okay is when, and because I paint a lot of weddings, as you may know, I paint a lot of black tuxes. And I have discovered through the school of hard knocks, if you will, that it's very hard to paint a black tux convincingly without using chroma black. Chroma black is generally the term used for what your professor told you to use, which is, like I'm using here, a combination of Prussian blue and oxide red. You can add to that viridian green, dioxazine violet, and so on and so forth. Any dark phthalo blue, permanent rose, and so on. All those dark transparent colors, when mixed, they create black. And I'm All right, are we back? There we go. Whew. All right. So at least my system worked. At least I realized when I'd lost sound. All right. I didn't say anything important while we were gone. I just discovered the sound was not working. Let's go back to this eye. I saw real quickly, I saw David's chat about black not appearing in nature. And I agree. But the question remains, what did you say? Does it show up in a black tux? Black really only shows up on picture, and black doesn't show in the outdoor of nature. That is correct. No, correct. I don't think there's really any place, if you will. I don't think there's any, unless you're just doing a stylized, very stylized, not realistic painting. There's no place for black in a landscape, night scene, for instance. You know what's funny? Look, somebody reminded me at my painters group last month. One of our members, very, very excellent artist, did a night scene, actually 2 night scenes, and he referenced Frederick Remington, who did a number, very many. Remington was a fabulous painter, really just amazing. To me, he's one of my, it is so unlikely that somebody as good as Frederick Remington, you know, existed out there in the wilderness. That's just crazy. How did somebody as good as him end up in the American Wild West, you know? He was a really good painter. And again, a good example of what I would call a real painter. He did real painting, not hyperrealism. Beautiful brushwork. Anyway, I'm sorry, I digress. ADD, ADD alert. Remington used a surprising amount of green in his nighttime skies. That is just crazy. Green! But look at it. Just Google Remington. I would love to see his paintings in real life. I've seen a couple because we used to live in Texas, but I haven't seen many. But anyway, talk about weird, counterintuitive. It works amazingly well. Green in a night sky. As I would say, who'd have thunk it? Who'd have thought of such a thing? All right. Whew. I'm going to call that done. It took me 7. I forgot. Or was it 12? 52. Okay, let's say 12 minutes. It took me 12 minutes with microphone problems. It was actually batteries, some battery side. It took me 12 minutes. Now this eye needs a little bit of work because I just moved it mechanically. Does that make sense? So now I step back and look at it and say, oh, wait. Needs a little bit of work here. But basically it took 12 minutes. So I say that to help me, maybe to help you not to freak out when you discover, oh no, I have to redo the entire eye. That's the way I feel on the inside. Does that make sense? But it turns out I don't really need to freak out quite that much because 12 minutes is, you know, kind of a flash in the pan when it comes to portrait, right? 12 minutes is not very much. So there you go. Once again, all my edges are just a little bit hard. So I'm going to clean off this little Winsor Newton Series 7. I think it's a number 1. Yeah, number 1. Clean it off and just, again, with my 2 pairs of glasses. I saw somebody made a comment about that. Yeah. And just soften. So in a way, you understand that by doing this, I'm violating the what's his name? I was talking about him yesterday. Mark Carter, C-A-R-D-E-R. I'm violating the Mark Carter principle of not blending, right? I'll give myself an excuse by saying I'm not really blending, I'm just fuzzing edges. That's complete rationalization, do you understand? But I'm gonna stick with it. Or as I say sometimes, shut up and leave me alone. And yes, in my house growing up, shut up was a bad word, so we were not allowed to say that. So I apologize. Now, let me stand back and look. Oh, that's wonderful. Now his eye is crooked. That's just good. So I need to bring down this corner of his eye a little bit. Good grief. Well, mistakes never end. Thanks for watching me. You got to have a lot of nerve to screw up in front of the whole world. Of course, not like the whole world is watching. At the end, you know, 200 or 300 people will watch this video. Don't worry, I do not have any false visions of grandeur here. But still, to screw up right in front of everybody does take some nerve. If I can help you by screwing up, then it's time well spent. All right, I think that's better. Yeah. Uncle 60, yes, I am using, today it's slow dry, so Neo McGill, that's typically the slowest medium I use. It's not technically a slow medium, but it's the slowest one that I typically use. All right, whew, let's back up a little bit, put down my second pair of glasses, put down these irritating little brushes. Now, don't get me wrong, I love my Winsor Newton Series 7. And I wish that I didn't beat the heck out of them because they're kind of expensive. I just seem, I'm an artist who is hard on brushes. Don't follow my example. Again, follow Mark Carter's example. His brushes, I think, last forever. All right, I'm going to move you out of the way just a little bit. Let's back up a little bit. And let's try to start doing some real painting here. Whew. Oh man, that was rough, wasn't it? All right, so now I'm back to, I think his eyes are okay for now. Hang on. Let's take advantage of the technology we have here. This is the mirror image. Now, let me back up a second. You understand, don't you? In fact, here, I'll do it for you, just for fun, just so you can see. If you're a regular follower of mine, then you might have noticed that every one of my studios has a mirror. In fact, several mirrors on the wall. The reason for that is this. His eyes are still not correct. Darn it. Okay, so there you go. That's what mirrors are for. Okay, and so the phone camera is just a technical version of a mirror. I'm going to take a picture again. And again, and apologies to those of you who are iPhone. It's really ironic that I'm a Droid guy because and I think his eyes might be too large. Rats. let's just keep screwing up here. Forget all that about going to real painting. I cannot leave this eye the way it is. Maybe either eye, I don't know. It's at this point in the painting process that I usually have to encourage myself with a little pep talk along the lines of, okay, Dan, okay, Nelson. Things get serious when you call yourself by your own last name. The goal is not to finish fast. The goal is to finish well. And of course, that's tempered by, in my case, the reality that I'm only being paid but so much for this portrait. And in this case, it's not very much. I mentioned that yesterday, but it's part of a package deal that I'm being paid very well for. So there you go. Anyway, I at this point try to remind myself, all right, the goal is not to finish fast. The goal is to finish well. And that's why portraits take a little longer. I'm going to leave that for now. Now let's indeed look at this nose. Oh yeah, it's terrible. And I'm going to, if I can find my pencil, I put it down somewhere. Here it is. Okay, need sharpening again. Bear with me just a moment. Again, because I do this crazy thing where I actually use black pencils. For those of you who are new, Jerry's Autorama makes it. It's called Jumbo Jet Black. Sorry, the Jumbo is worn off. Jumbo Jet Black. It's it's not as greasy as a grease pencil, but it's slightly more greasy than a Conti crayon. It's charcoal in an oil, wax might be a better word. Charcoal in a wax base, okay? And I'm just going to use this to redraw the bottom of his nose. And again, what I'm doing right now, this is not normal. Okay, you students, any students watching? You know, if you start busting out a black pencil in your painting class, your art professor is very likely to have a stroke or give you a stroke, one or the other, and yell at you and say things like, "You don't use pencils in oil painting." And he or she would be correct, except that when you're an old fogey artist like me who has stumbled on things, you can do whatever the heck you want. So there you go. But it's very unconventional, not at all normal. There, nose is better already. Isn't that nice? That was a quick fix. While we're fixing little stuff, let's go ahead and fix his mouth as well. It's pretty good, but it turns up just a little bit more on both ends. And then I need to carve into it. So I'm mixing up a pale flesh tone. And even what I'm doing right here, wow, it's a little bit bright. That's way bright. Even holding my brush in this manner is, again, not good painting. Okay, so let's do some real painting here for a minute. Left hand, brush held it in one of the appropriate manners. Now that's way too bright, except that, and it still might be too bright, except that I want this boy's entire face to come up in value. Does that make sense? Ooh, a little bit of pink blush right there. By the way, I didn't mention this yesterday. The red that I'm using for blush in a flesh tone, my favorite for sure, is Scarlet Lake. You can't find a Scarlet Lake. Not every manufacturer makes a Scarlet Lake. Hey, Jason. Thank you, my friend. It is the result that matters. I talked yesterday quite a bit about the inadvisability of painting of course, first, painting from a photograph is bad, but as someone who makes a living at this, it's like, yeah, okay, be a snob if you want to. And we have a name for people who are artistic snobs. They're called starving artists. Okay, so I will do what needs to be done. And hey, am I not having fun? Am I not painting? Am I not making a living by painting? So who the heck cares if it's from a photograph? That's just life sometimes. So people who turn up their nose and say, hey, I would never paint from a photograph, you know the type that I mean. Well, God bless their little crusty, rusty souls. I'm glad they can do that, but my career is not at a point where I can literally turn up my nose at a commission simply because it's not perfect. So that's me. The other thing is it's very bad, if you will, bad to paint from a photograph that is a flash photograph. That's really bad. And this is a flash photograph. If these boys were still this age, I would probably have begged my client, say, no, please, please, please go back and take another picture of them without a flash. I discovered, I mentioned this yesterday, I've discovered that most non-artists, and this is kind of hard for us artists to believe, but we have to try to, those of us who are gifted with our eyes, and that's what it is, it's eye gifting, not way more than hand or anything else gifting. We see what other people don't see. Most people cannot discern flash photography. They don't know the difference between. So when I say to them, as I have many times in the past, I'll do a portrait of you or your kid or your dog or whatever, but no flash photography, underlined, all caps, boldface, exclamation point, 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 point. No flash photography. And what do people do? They send me flash photography. So somebody, I think Uncle 60, you mentioned yesterday that there doesn't seem to be much lighting. Oh, that's exactly correct. The lighting on this is horrendous. But what can you do? Not much. So you just paint what you see. And again, here's the here's the truth. If people can't see that this is a flash photograph, neither will they be able to see that your painting is from a flash photograph. Does that make sense? So at some point you need to, we as artists need to sort of, don't be a snob. Stop thinking like an artist and try to think like the customer. To them, this painting will be just beautiful. And it will look, they'll say, oh, it looks just like the photograph, which of course you and I know is not a great compliment, but we know what they mean, and we accept it graciously. So, yeah, there's many aspects of this this particular portrait that are... All right, now, I think his lips might be the correct shape, finally. So I'm down to his lips, at least for this go-round. I think what is making them look off right now is the color. That was a big lesson for me to learn, by the way. I don't remember really at what point I learned it, but I'm still learning, of course. But when you're struggling to capture a likeness, sometimes you can have all the lines, quote unquote, the lines, so to speak, the lines of demarcation between this zone and that. You can have all the lines in the right place, but if your values are not correct, very often you won't nail a likeness simply because the values aren't right. So let's try to make these lips, before I start judging too harshly on the lips, let's try to get them, mostly they need to be lightened. So let's see. Another challenge with this particular photograph is that it's quite fuzzy. I did everything I could in I did everything I could in Photoshop, I meant to say. I did everything in Photoshop I could to optimize this picture. Of course I tweaked the color. And, you know, smart sharpen and all kinds of other things. Only those of you who are Photoshoppers know what I'm talking about. Anyway, so I did the best I could with what I've got. And even at that, it's not a very fantastic. Oh, now here's a little minor problem. I'm being facetious here. His mouth has wandered off center. That's a pretty bad problem, isn't it? Let me see if I can get my music going again. I know you guys don't need my music, but I do. It helps keep me settled. Forgive me just a minute here. There we go. Whew. All right. Yeah, boy, his mouth looks worse than it did just a few minutes ago. Are we having fun? Yeah, we are. Are we having fun? So let's move the whole thing over. Now, I checked yesterday, and yes, this boy has, on one side, its classic measurement, that is to say, let's check it again. Iris, corner of mouth, yes. Iris, corner of mouth. His over here, his mouth, I'm making it look worse and worse. Bear with me, or don't leave me if you want. I wouldn't blame you for leaving. Like, this is irritating to watch. Over here, his mouth doesn't go quite as far as his eye. And I think I've got that just about correct. Yeah, Susan. Jason, you must be a pretty good artist, my friend, because you're saying all the correct thing. That's exactly the only real problems happen in watercolor. That's exactly right. Every watercolorist groans a groan of identification. Say, boy, is that true. Every other medium, like oil, acrylic, charcoal, pencil, whatever, can be fixed. It's only a real disaster when it's in watercolor. Oh boy. And I think I enjoy doing watercolor portraits. I've done several. You can see them on my website if you want, dannelsonart.com. Click paint now. Doggone it. I think I'm going in reverse on this little guy's face. Okay, there's a whole bunch of stuff. Tell you what, let me back up. I'm going to go back up and do some real painting. Let's go back up to his eyes, actually his cheeks. And let's do some, again, back to some real painting. Are you understanding? If there's any students watching, let me explain. What do I mean by real painting? Well, first of all, it's easy to describe what I mean by not real painting. Not real painting is holding your brushes in this death control grip. Now, some good artists hold back here. Even that, to me, I don't, it taps into the wrong part of your little inner psyche. So real painting is when you hold the brush like a real artist, side saddle, and you make marks. This is the key part. It's not so much how you hold the brush, although how you hold the brush impacts. You make marks that can be seen as marks. Does that make sense? You make brush strokes that are identifiable as brush strokes. And I was, especially on this face, I'm quite happy with the the liveliness, if you will, of stroke. Not quite so much here, but I'm not done yet. So real painting is you make strokes that are seeable. You can still see them. And one of the things that means is that you don't put a stroke down and then, and then brush, 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 brush. Smooth it out. Again, which is a very beginner tendency. All right? Yeah, I'm told, I went to quite some length yesterday quoting Mark Carter and his delightful trick that he plays on his portrait painting students. He says to them, today the assignment is you're going to do the worst portrait of your life. So he gets them all set up. He gets them pliable because they all know they're going to do a terrible portrait. He says, you're going to do the worst portrait of your life. And he says, I want you to put down every stroke and not blend it. I just want you to put down the stroke and then put down one next to it. And of course, I would suspect, I don't know, I haven't seen him do it live. I've just heard him described on his YouTube video. And I would suspect that about 80%, something 75, 80, 90% through this experiment, all of a sudden all the students begin to realize that he has played a trick on them. They are in fact doing the best portrait of their career by not blending. So that's one way to describe what I am here calling today real painting. It's painting like Frederick Remington, painting like John Singer Sargent, Boucher. I'm drawing a blank again. The guy that does little pudgy angels, the pudgy angels guy. Yeah. That's real painting. And again, when I was a young man, I didn't quite perceive, and I will say, I usually say not very good things about my professors, but, but today I'll say something good. They actually did try to instill in us an understanding of the word I remember them using the most was painterly. Painterly strokes. Whoops, that's too strong, but let's go with it anyway. I like this value. It's too much of a jump from what I did, from what is right next to it. So do you see, real painting is you put down a mark and you leave it. That's one way to put it. Yes, spend all that time getting the color right, only to mess it up. Here's a good example of what I mentioned earlier. In portraiture, it's okay to get darker using opaque, because the subtleties, the tolerances are so tight, so to speak, in portraiture. All right. Hey, Toby. Yeah, Boucher, Fragonard. Did somebody tell me who's the artist? Real famous. More famous than those. You know, 17th, 18th century. Did all, you know, kind of chubby women and chubby cherubic babies. What's that? What's the name? I'm silly. I'm drawing a blank. I find often when my David saying bravo. Dan, you screwed up the nose again. Port card time soon. Oh my goodness! I thought I was gonna whip out this little guy in 20 minutes. I'm going to have to go to a separate broadcast, aren't I? David says I screwed up the nose again. Maybe. Whoops. All right, gang. I've had the power plug my power unplugged because of the noise. Listen to this. Testing 1, 2, 3. All right, seems to be all right. So I had to plug my phone back in. Painting with my left hand very much, am I? It always makes me nervous. It makes me think I'm not painting very well if I'm doing it all with my right hand. That is, I'm serious as I can be. Probably stuck in my left brain if I'm painting too much with my right hand. But I'm going back to my right hand again for this stroke right here. I'm using the butt end of my brush, as you can see, periodically, just to mess things up. If I've got a line that's come out too hard, let's go up and work on this ear that I moved down a little bit. The problem with tight painting, which this is what I'm doing now, everything I'm doing this morning here is too tight. The problem with tight painting is that once you start down that rabbit hole, I'll say, there is no turning back. That's the problem. Once you begin painting, as I have been doing for the last hour, once you start painting too tight, you're stuck. And that's why it's not good painting. That's why John Singer Sargent would never go down that rabbit hole, because he would keep everything abstract enough. When your painting is quite abstract, I'll use that term, the viewer's mind completes the picture, the painting, and gives the painter credit for realism. Does that make sense? It's part of the magic of, again, what I'm going to call good painting, which is not what I've been doing this morning. Now, I do, because I know that, I have some little tricks up my sleeve. And that is because I'm not good enough. You know, my joke is people use my name and John Singer Sargent's name in the same sentence all the time. They really do. They say, well, he sure ain't no John Singer Sargent. All right? So, but he's dead and I'm still alive, so there's hope for me to get better. Maybe not as good as him, but there's hope for me to get better. So one of my tricks up my sleeve, so to speak, is after all of this horribly tight painting, is to come in as a final stage and mess it up a little bit. Do some final strokes. So in other words, if you're not good enough, as I am not, I confess, if you're not good enough to do John Singer Sargent painting, you can at least fake it. So now, do I have the nerve to do that? I'm not sure that I do. I'm still working on getting the face right. And what I mean by fake it is come in at the very end and do a few bolder strokes on the very top. That is a trick I've employed many times over the years to, I would say, satisfactory effect. It's also a trick that I use when I'm doing my landscapes, especially when I'm painting figures in a landscape. So, as many of you know, for me, a landscape is more often than not is a cityscape, and the cities have people in them. So, like the painting I did here, let me show you, it's right here. I'm going to touch it up a little bit later today. I thought I finished, and I really essentially finished this painting last week, but it's been hanging around, and so it's going to get just a little tiny bit of touch up. Can you see that? There we go. All right. So this is a bunch of people sitting in a cafe. Let me try to give you a better angle. There we go. It's a very unusual painting because the top is light and bright and colorful, and the bottom is all very muted. So these figures, they have to be accurate, quote unquote. You can't have an arm that's too long, a leg that's too short, a head that's too big, and so forth, right? They have to be accurate, which usually, for me, requires an over fastidiousness, over fussiness, Of course, I mean, calling this fussy versus calling that fussy are two very different things, right? Not even in the same league. But anyway, you could still see here, for instance, after painting in an overly fussy manner, I can't remember, I probably put my fingers in a rag and just rubbed, just made marks. You can still see these marks. And they went right through these people. Now, I won't do that on a portrait, but it's the same principle, just at a different degree, different layer of degree. And all right, I hereby declare that I am suffering horribly from portrait blindness. This is an affliction that afflicts, I think, all portrait painters, no matter how good they are. I've been working on this painting, this face, far too long, and I can no longer see my mistakes. I can't see what's good, what's bad. It's just just a blur. So forget that. I can tell it's not perfect. Something's wrong with it, but I can't fix it now. So I'm going to leave it and go to this face. Oh, by the way, here's a good tip for any of you who are, again, emerging portrait painters. This is something I stumbled on 6 or 7 years ago. Long story, I won't give you the story, but I discovered that and I bet you too, I can do 5 or 10 portraits at one time way better than I can do one portrait at a time. For the simple reason that if I'm doing, and literally I did this several days, 10 portraits in one day, 15 minutes on the first one, second, third, fourth, 15 minutes on each one. Then when I come back to the first one again, which only has 15 minutes, I just barely got started, but working on all the others has completely cured my portrait blindness on number 1 and number 2. Does that make sense? So I just cycled through them. So all 10 portraits came up like this, little by little, and it's a cure, if you will, a solution to portrait blindness. Man, that irritates me, I gotta tell you. It really does irritate me. All right, so much for being irritated. I think what I should do, this episode has gone on nearly for an eternity. So I've seen several of your chats already, but I haven't seen them all. I'm going to end this broadcast here, but let me go back and, boy, all your great chats, and I didn't get them all. Kathy Keefe, Alicio Paluso from Italy. I don't know if you're still with us, but that was great fun to have you with us for a while. What program? Well, some of the rest of you may be interested in, and Alicio may not be watching any longer, but I will show you what I'm using. It's a camera. This is my old one that's broken, but this is the one I'm using right now. It's called a Mevo, M-E-V-O, to answer that question. If you buy one, do get the service contract, because so far I've had 2 Mevos in a row die in under 6 months. So watch out for that. It's a good product, but doesn't seem to hold up real well. A lot of good chats here. Jason, thanks. I don't know if you're still with us. John Singer. And somebody said later, was it you, Jason, said John Singer Sargent was no, yeah, it was no Rembrandt. Correct. Correct. Oh, Uncle 60 had to leave us. Bye-bye. He was getting the look. Oh, I'm going backwards now. Good job. Somebody's painting an eagle. Susan's painting some portraits. All right, are we there? For some reason, my phone lost connection, so I'm just back just long enough to say see ya. I'm going to end this broadcast. So there's number 700. Woo! It wasn't particularly stellar or exciting, but it was painful. Oh my goodness. That just irritates me. I like this a lot better now. I'll try not to mess this up the way I did this one. It's okay. The eyes are better. I made some big changes on the eyes and the nose. It's in the right place. Now it's just a matter of getting the shading and modeling correct. Okay, so thank you for joining me. I will paint by myself for a while, and I fully expect to bring you guys back in later this afternoon. Anybody who can make it, thanks for joining me. And thanks always for your chats. Bye-bye.